Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. I am Jordan Hall, and I am thrilled to be joined by the play-by-play voice of the Flyers, Jim Jackson. Jim, thank you so much for coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah. I'm doing well. The Flyers coming off that second win over the Devils in 10 days. And Jim, I want to ask you about that and so much more with the state of the team. Always love your insight on here. But let's get into these last two wins over New Jersey. Jim, I think a lot of people believe this Devils team is a playoff team, potentially a contender. I know New Jersey didn't have its starting goalie in either of the games. Nico Hischier was missing in the second matchup. But these were quality wins. Are they wins that tell you that the Flyers are starting to maybe put things together? Can they do it consistently?
I think Jordan, really, the team's play over the last month, minus a couple of games here and there, has been improved. So more so than who they're playing or who's in the lineup for the other team or who's not or where that team is in the standings. I'm just going by. I don't want to sound like John Tortorella, but I'm going by the way the Flyers are playing, and to me, their process has been better of late. The process has actually been improved since the bad start. Then they had, I think, some goaltending issues, and uh, that hurt them. But they've really started to outshoot and outchance teams on a pretty consistent basis. Not as consistently as the run last year, but still, in general, they've been getting the better of play. The analytics seem to indicate that the Flyers have a lot of good things going on. So I don't know as if it was these two games. I mean, they definitely caught the Devils at the right time. The Devils have been in a scoring slump going into the first meeting up in New Jersey, and as you mentioned, Hischier, that's a huge loss for them. He takes so many draws. Obviously, their leading goal scorer, so. That was a humongous loss for them. But then again, the Flyers were without some people too. So I don't get caught too much up in that. I think that the Flyers are something like 6-3-1 now in their last 10.
Yeah.
You think, well, it could have been better if they'd played better in those two games up in New York. But 6-3-1 is pretty good. The problem I see is that everybody around them is about the same record over the last 10 games. So they aren't gaining ground in this race that was being portrayed as a snail race not too long ago. It's no longer a snail race. There's about 5, 6 really hot teams. And if the Flyers hadn't gone 6-3-1 in this last stretch, let's say they've been 4-4-2 or whatever, or below 500, they'd be in real rough straits. Having done what they've done, they've at least hung in there, but they still
Yeah.
have a lot of work to do. But in general, playing better. I think if they play the way they've been playing, they're going to win a lot of hockey games if they continue to get the goaltending that they've gotten from Sam Ersson here of late. So some ifs there, but if those things come together, they could go on a pretty good run. They got two real important games, coming up in division, and then four more after that into the Four Nations break. So hopefully they can take these 6 games and win four at least of them, and get some points and go into that break still within reach of those wild card spots. And then we'll look forward to the stretch run and the trade deadline, which will be very interesting.
Indeed. Yeah. And I thought the same thing. Recently, last 9, 10 games, they've looked more like a John Tortorella team. Whereas last year, that's what I was seeing was out shooting, out chancing teams, making it easier on the goaltender. But how important has Samuel Ersson been? This is the best I think we've seen him play over his last 10 starts. He's been excellent. And I think we all know that the goaltender goes a long way in the team's psyche and the play in front. It seems like John Tortorella has been very open about that Ersson is giving them what they've needed, and it's helped them play better in front of them.
Yeah, I mean there is a little chicken and the egg to this whole thing
Yeah.
with how much the goaltender affects the team, how much does the team's poor play affect the goaltender. We're always trying to decipher that, right, with any team. But there is no doubt that Sam has really settled in here. His biggest problem this year has been injuries. When he'd get on a roll, he'd tweak something, and we just hope those tweaks don't happen anymore. And I think if that's the case, they know from last year to spread his playing time out a little bit. So Fedotov's going to have to win some games. There's no doubt about it, because they don't want Sam running out of gas. Sam might end up going to the Four Nations. I'm not so sure that's a great thing for the Flyers. It's great for Sam for sure.
Yeah.
And he may not play. He may just go and do practices and so forth. Although if two Swedish goalies are down, that puts him pretty close to playing. And the way he's playing right now, he might be the best Swedish goalie in terms of right at this particular time. So
Yeah.
maybe he does play. So much for him getting a break, which I think probably would be good for him. But you're not going to turn that down. That's for sure. So in general, I think his play has much to do with it. I mean, let's face it, their team save percentage through January, I guess through the turn of the calendar into January was like 876, 877. Yeah, I mean, I don't care what team you have. It's very hard to win when you have a team save percentage there. Now, was it all the goalies? Absolutely not. But were the goalies stealing games for them? No. And were the goalies costing them some games here and there? Yes. So it was a major factor. I don't think you're ever going to see a team certainly win the cup, certainly go on a run for the cup with an 877 team save percentage. I don't think you'll see many teams make the playoffs with an 877 team save percentage. I mean, that's just putting too much stress on all the other areas of your team. You're going to have to score a lot of goals. Your defense is going to have to be perfect. So it was a struggle for the team, and maybe not surprising. You're talking about and giving Kolosov and Fedotov a little bit of an excuse. They're both adjusting to a lot of newness. Fedotov older and more mature, and I think maybe can better handle the off ice adjustment and has a better handle on the language. But it's still an adjustment for him in terms of the style of play and
Yeah.
the grind of it all. And for Kolosov, all of that plus the language thing and everything else. So we shouldn't, I don't think, be shocked that they've had some struggles here and there. The question is, do they have it in them to be an NHL goalie? And we're still trying to find that out. Sam, we know is an NHL goalie. We're trying to find out, is he a number one or is he a 1A, 1B situation where he has to be a tandem goalie? We haven't found that out yet. I don't think Sam knows yet because, he hasn't had a full season where he's been able to do that. This would be it. And the injuries have kind of cut into that, and the injuries might be part of the equation. So we're still looking into that. But we do know Sam can give you really top notch goaltending for a good long stretch. A whole year, not sure, but a good long stretch. And if he's settling into that pattern right now, Justin, Jordan, it's a good thing because that good long stretch might get the Flyers into the race and heading into April and the big games down the stretch. Last year, of course, that was a struggle for them that time of year. Maybe they're getting set for a better run this year.
It's a critical year because they're trying to figure out so much about some of the pieces they have and which pieces are going to be a part of the future, which might not. And two, I think are very much in net. And that's where they really need to figure out who exactly Samuel Ersson is at this level. Can Ivan Fedotov be a capable backup? This is the most important position in the game, and the Flyers are trying to figure that out. Is it still probably the biggest position in your mind, Jim, that they need to get answers for moving forward?
I think there's a lot of positions, really, Jordan, that they have to get answers from. I think that's what this year is about as much as making the playoffs. It's about getting answers on the forwards and the defensemen. But yeah, goaltending is as important, I think, as any position in sport. Quarterback, pitching, goaltending. Those are your three that you really think about. And pitchers, as far as starting pitchers, only are once every 5 games. So then it comes down to kind of from an everyday basis, quarterbacks and goalies might be your two most important positions in terms of how they impact their team. So from that standpoint, yeah, they got to get answers. It's very important. They may not have complete answers on a guy like Kolosov. He's only 23 years old, just turned 23. And Fedotov is a veteran guy they're trying to figure out. Sam, he's been around now, 2.5 years, so we're starting to get an idea about that. So those answers are coming for sure. They have some good young goalies in the system, so they know they're going to eventually have to take a look at them too. So it's a matter of finding out who's going to move forward. But that really can be said about the forwards and the defensemen as well. So that's really what it's all about. It has been the last 2 years. I know fans get a little impatient when they see some big players move like Mika Rantanen, and you start thinking, wow, how come the Flyers don't go after players like that? Well, they're just not there yet. They don't have, I don't think, enough assets, first of all, that they're willing to trade to get a guy like Rantanen, and they're just not quite there yet. But that day's coming where they will have to add to the mix to try to get them to the next step, but not yet. Now, will that be the case at the trade deadline? Again, as Jonesy and Danny have said ad nauseum, the players will tell them, and that means the players' performance will tell them, and they're going to have to be right in it and showing signs of being a team that can go on the kind of run that's going to get a playoff spot, and then maybe they help them out. I'm not saying by going after an old veteran or anything, but maybe they make a hockey trade where they help the team in down the middle or something like that. Who knows? But at this point, I think they're still kind of waiting and seeing and seeing what the players are going to tell them.
Jim, you mentioned the word process earlier. I want to look at the big picture process for the Flyers, the rebuild. Where do you think it is? I know that's a broad question, but this season they're 3 wins fewer than they had last year at this point. But maybe that was par for the course, that it was potentially they could take a step back. We knew they had questions in net. We knew they were going to be looking at younger players. Matvei Mishkov was going to get acclimated to the NHL. Do you feel like they're still on track with where they want to go and where they want to eventually be?
I think they are. I mean, rebuilds are like young players. It's not a linear situation where you just consistently get better and go up a hill. There's ups and downs with it, and we're seeing some of those. I think goaltending was a big part of the downs through the first half of this year. But you're right. I mean, Matvei Michkov is having growing pains too. He's 20 years old, and
Yeah.
this league is hard. And I mean, I look at all the rookies. Uh, Celebrini had an injury. He's had a couple quiet periods. Lane Hudson had a quiet period. He's going bonkers now. It's tough as a rookie to just be good all year long. So, given that, and given Michkov was going to be a big part of the team, the goaltending issues, what have you, the one loss record has probably been impacted by that. Last year, they were a surprise to be in a playoff spot for as long as they were. This year, they're probably closer to where everybody expected them to be last year.
Yeah.
Does that mean it's a step back? I don't think so. I mean, again, you look at it individually. They're going through this process to find out who's going to be part of it going into the future. So you're looking at your young veterans from the 25, soon to be 26-year-olds like Owen Tippett and Morgan Frost, Noah Cates. You're looking for them to take that next step. You're looking for guys like Tyson Forster, Cam York to take the next step. I think Cam York's been impacted by an injury. I think his play's coming around now. I think Tyson Forster's been pretty close to where he was last year. He started to get penalty kill time. You can see they're adding some responsibilities to him. I think he's fine. I think that Morgan Frost has had a eerily similar season to his last couple, where he struggles early, gets scratched, and then comes back and plays better. And Owen Tippett looks great. He's exciting. He's a factor every night, but the production, I think, is probably not quite where they would expect it. I mean, he's on pace for 25 goals. I think the
Yeah.
Flyers would like to see him more of a 30 to 40 goal scorer. But he does bring so many elements to the offense with his speed and his size and so forth. So, I mean, some of the players have taken that next step. Noah Cates obviously has. Um, and others have not quite done that. There's Jamie Drysdale on defense. They're still, working with him, and it's a work in progress. So many players where that is the case. You have your Sanheim and your Konechny, who have been really good pretty much all year, especially TK, who's at all-star level as far as I'm concerned. And not just all-star, but like the final team all-star, one of the top wings in the league, first or second team. I'm not talking about make the All-Star game. I'm talking about the final All-Star. I think he's been that good. Uh, so you've got that. That's certainly been there, and that's helped the performance of the team all year. And you got Ristolainen, who's been consistently really good all year. And then you've got some other veterans who've really done what you expected them to do, the Laughtons and the Hathaways and players of that ilk. I'm forgetting some players, but the bottom line is it's hard to say, is the rebuild on schedule, because it's so hard to figure out what a schedule for rebuild is. I think from a fan standpoint, they probably go by wins and losses. This team, so close to making the playoffs last year, got Michkov earlier than expected, should make the playoffs this year. I was one of the people who said that during the offseason.
Mhm.
Why not think that? And I'm still saying, why not hope that? But we're seeing with Michkov, we're seeing with some of the other younger players that you don't just step into the NHL and just have a smooth ride. There's a lot to learn, especially for someone who's also learning about a new culture. So, so to answer your question, or try to answer your question, I don't know as if any of us know. I don't even know if Danny Briere or Keith Jones, Dan Hilferty, anybody really knows whether the rebuild's on schedule or not. You have to watch this, see how it evolves here through the Four Nations and then out of the Four Nations. The big time you have to make this evaluation, obviously, is the trade deadline, and you have to figure it out. Do we actually add to this team a little bit and try to push them? Or do we sell off and continue to add assets? They have a lot of them for next year's draft. So I don't know how much interest there is in trading for picks in this coming draft. But if the team falters enough, they may trade for picks in the next draft. If the team is right there, maybe they make a trade where they're giving up a little bit to get a young player or something back to change the chemistry of the team, maybe fill in a need, as I said earlier, as opposed to just getting future assets. So a lot of different ways they can go. Had a long talk with Danny not too long ago, and he's aware of all this.
Mm.
He's got his finger on the pulse, believe me. And his press conference the other day was, I thought, pretty much as expected. He said, "We're keeping all options open, but we're not dying to move Rasmus Ristolainen or Scott Lawton. It's not like we have to get rid of them. They have years left in their contracts." So, and some people reacted negatively to that. I'm like, what do you expect him to say? Yeah, we're going to move him no matter what. No, he's not going to say that. And I don't think he feels that that's the case. So you have to adjust this. And we just aren't to the point of the season yet. I don't think, Jordan, where you can say, okay, they're selling, or okay, they're buying. The Eastern Conference is such last time I checked, it was 9 teams separated by what, 4 points, 5 points.
Yeah.
It's just everybody's alive pretty much, except maybe Buffalo.
Yeah.
So with so many teams involved, and the Flyers being one of them, it's pretty hard to make any assessment as far as how you're going to impact this year. And as far as the bigger picture, always the future is what they're looking for. So we saw it last year. They were in a playoff position and they traded one of their best defensemen. So are they still there? I mean, maybe they're a little bit further along in the rebuild now with Michkov here and so forth a year later, that maybe they don't make that trade if they think it's going to really hurt the team this year. I'm not sure of that. We shall see. Certainly, Risto seems to be the case study of that, because he's getting a lot of the minutes that Sean Walker was getting last year, right? A different kind of players, I understand, but second pair D getting a lot of minutes. So, I mean, that's really where you might want to find out. That might be the litmus test to see where Danny thinks we are if he doesn't move Risto. Only difference, of course, also being Risto has term left. But if he doesn't move him, it might mean that he thinks that he's too important to keep right now to help this team now. If he does move him, he's obviously thinking the rebuild is still several years off as far as when they're going to push to make the playoffs. I don't think the answer is he has the answer as we sit here today. I think by the trade deadline, he might have a little bit better of an idea. He'll have to, because you're going to have to make moves based upon it.
I think it's wise to hold those players in high regard. Danny Briere, I think, is being smart there. There's no reason to sell off Scott Lawton for under, for poor value, just to move him, just to say you did a move. Same with Rasmus Ristolainen. You could argue both those players are playing some of the best hockey of their careers, and they're not up there too high in age. They still have some term left, so I just think that's smart business by Danny Briere. And Jim, the one thing I think that's really just appealing to the Flyers rebuild is they have assets, they have picks, as you mentioned, 6 in the first 2 rounds this upcoming summer. I think they have some young prospects to be excited about. And I think they still have a lot of players in that 25 to 26-year-old range that could potentially still be growing. So if they were a team that, had a lot of players that were in their early to mid 30s and bad contracts, I'd be concerned. But if the Flyers stay a little status quo right now, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, because it's almost like they're watching players more than they are the results. I know that's tough to do, because I think everyone judges wins and losses, and that's kind of how you judge success and failure. But it's almost like you're really evaluating the players closer than you are the team collecting wins or losses.
You are, but having said that, if enough of the players are taking those next steps, you're going to win more games. So
Yeah.
eventually, one's going to lead to the other. There is a little bit going on right now with the Flyers. If you look at some of the analytics, they're better than the results. Last I saw, the York Sanheim defense pairing was the top expected goals defense pairing in the league. And last I looked, the Cates line was up there near the top in terms of lines.
Hmm.
So that means they're playing well, but the team isn't going on some kind of 10 or 11 game winning streak. Although, again, they've been pretty good 6-3-1 over a 10-game stretch. You do that in for 8-10 game stretches, you're going to make the playoffs. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a situation where I think maybe the underlying numbers are a little bit better than the actual results. So that's when you're evaluating individuals, you might be a little bit higher than as you look at where the team is. And that might be where some of the fans get a little frustrated. And let's face it, we're all, as we follow this, you reporting, me calling the games, and fans watching the games. We're fans in some sense. We watch, and you get caught up in wanting victories just because for you it's easier to cover victories. For me, it's a lot more fun to call victories. The fans clearly just want victories, and they want a playoff spot. It's been coming up on 5 years, so I completely understand some of their impatience there. But impatience can kill rebuilds. So you have to find a way. Danny Briere does, and Keith Jones and the Flyers have to find a way to be patient, even when they start to hear more and more fans saying, "We got to make a move." I mean, the Rantanen trade should not have caused any kind of stir. That he was never in the ballpark with the Flyers. He just was not. Now he's going to be a free agent in the offseason. If the Flyers determine they need a really high end forward, who's what is Rantanen, 29?
Yeah, I wanna
Um,
say he's, like, right around 30.
yeah. I mean, he's a little on the old end for where they want to go, but at that point, they don't have to trade any assets. They can just sign him. So, and the cap space is coming. So they can get another crack at him possibly. I don't think that's in the plans, but I mean, that certainly is a possibility, unless, of course, he gets signed by Carolina. But I mean, Rantanen should not have caused a big stir. And when I see some people out there and podcasts and so forth saying that the Flyers are in purgatory, they're not drafting high enough to get great players, but they're not winning enough to make the playoffs. It's not really purgatory yet. First of all, they have had in what the last 8 years a second, fifth, and seventh overall pick, right? Only one of those is with the
Yeah,
team right now. These people
yeah.
who say you have to have a top five pick in order to win a Stanley Cup. I know the numbers show there haven't been a lot of teams lately. I think the Blues might have even had one, but there aren't that many. It's great to get one of those, but you can't. That's the people want them to tank and all that, and you can't guarantee a number one. This draft coming up, the more I'm talking to people, is more of a balanced draft anyhow. There's not a one or a two or three that's going to change a franchise. We're finding out with Connor Bedard and Celebrini and Michkov and all these. One player can't turn around a franchise. It just doesn't happen that way in the NHL. And Connor McDavid's still waiting for his Stanley Cup decade later. I mean, it's
Mhm.
hard. You can be a spectacular player, but that doesn't necessarily get you a Stanley Cup. And so for these people out there saying they're in purgatory, how are they in purgatory? They have the fifth youngest team in the NHL. They're competitive in a playoff race. They have 6 picks in the first 2 rounds. It was supposed to be a very deep draft next year. They have Jet Lutchenko, Oliver Bonk, Denver Barkey, several other lower prospects that aren't getting quite the pub, but they have several other prospects coming. Their prospect pool takes a hit just because Michkov comes over early. If Michkov was still in Russia, they'd be up near the top 5 or 6 of the league in terms of prospect pools, as it is there in the middle of the pack. But with those 6 picks, if they keep them all, I don't think they will, but maybe they will. If they get all 6 of those picks, their prospect pool is going to go right back up near the top. I mean, it's just a situation where they're not in purgatory. They're in the middle stages, really the early getting toward the middle stages of rebuilding. It's a tough time because you just don't know when you make that leap to pushing for winning now. They're not there yet. Are they getting closer? I think they are. But again, the players are going to tell you that. And right now, I have not myself seen enough from this team. If I was the GM to say, okay, let's go out and let's buy. You're in the mix, but you also haven't been like last year's team was in a better spot than this year's team in a playoff spot for all those days. So these are why the GMs have a tough gig. He's got to assess all of that. But as we said, uh, that's going to happen closer to the trade deadline than right now. I'm sure there's some offers and things floating around out there. I have total trust in Danny Briere. I mean, he showed you with his very first move, really, the Provorov trade. He can be very creative.
Yeah.
So I think it's not like he's just sitting on his hands, not paying attention. He's got his finger on the pulse, as I said earlier, of the team and of what's going on around him. People, we just all get impatient because we want trades, we want
Yeah.
moves, or we want the team to be, in first place. We're not getting any of that. So we all get a little impatient. But again, impatience can kill rebuilds. So you have to fight against making a move to make a move. Those usually don't work out well.
And I'm sure Flyers fans, they see that 500 record and it bothers them a little bit. It makes them think purgatory. It makes them think middling
Yeah.
team. I, I think very much it can be a part of the process of what the Flyers are going through to get better. They're trying to be competitive. They don't want to take steps backward. They understand that might be there, but they want to use what they have here and try to get better while drafting and developing. And Jim, I think they're again similar to last year. They're in a fascinating spot as the trade deadline gets closer. The deadline is March 7th, so we're getting closer to about 5 weeks away. Last year, they were in a playoff position, and they still had the future in mind. This year, I don't think they have a clear cut candidate to be moved like they did Sean Walker, but I think they'll have players that will have appeal to contending teams. Uh, if the Flyers have a subdued trade deadline, is that an okay thing? If they don't sell off pieces rather aggressively, if they maybe only move one player, how do you think fans will react to that? How do you think that should be viewed as a part of the process?
Well, I mean, I have trust in Danny Briere knowing what he's being offered. If he's getting offers for his players that he thinks will help this team now, or more importantly, probably in the future, he'll make the moves. If he's not, you don't force the move again just to make the move, even though public opinion is going to say maybe you should do that. So I think it really comes down to what the offers are, what kind of market is there for some of the players that might be movable. And then he has to weigh their value now, their value moving forward versus the value of what they're going to get. I have confidence Danny will make the right moves. He's just, I mean, he knows what he wants. Team to be competitive now, consistent greatness later. In order to get to that consistent greatness, and by that I mean every single year, you get ready for a season and you go to your websites that have the season previews, or you pick up your Hockey News yearbook or whatever you use, it's going to say the Flyers are one of the teams that are contending for the cup, not just to make the playoffs, year after year after year. And it was like that, Jordan. It was like that for many, many years around here.
Mm.
It can be like that again. But in order to get to that stage, you can't make quick moves and try to apply tourniquets here and there and just get better to squeak into the playoffs. You have to make moves that will help long term. So I have to have faith in Danny Briere doing that. And again, I don't think he knows right now. I think he'll have a better idea 10, 12 games down the road, and we'll see where they're at. I mean, last year, remember, he also did acquire Eric Johnson. It wasn't like he just completely left the team out there. He got some criticism for that. Remember, if a draft,
Yeah,
it was a fourth round pick he gave up for Eric. I can't remember, third or fourth. But
that's a great question. I want to say it
yeah,
was a third, if I remember
yeah, but
correctly,
I mean,
third
it's
or
not
fourth.
it wasn't something that was going to, really impact the rebuild, but he still got flack for it because, "Why are you doing that?" Well, he did that because they had some injuries on D, and they had traded Walker as well, and they had to have bodies, and they got a good veteran, a great guy who wanted actually to come back this year. So I think he's gonna probably try to do that juggling act a little bit again this year. I mean, do I think that if the Flyers trade Rasmus Ristolainen, who seems to be a name out there, or Scott Lawton, or maybe and Scott Lawton, does that accelerate the Flyers rebuild to a point where they're closer by a year or two? I don't think so,
Mm.
personally. I mean, are they going to get them first round picks? Maybe if the Flyers eat some money. Um, you have 6 picks in the first 2 rounds of next year's draft. So how badly do you need first round picks? I mean, if players are getting those players, they're more likely than not in the playoffs, and you're not talking about a high first round pick. So all these things have to be weighed, and I have confidence that Danny Briere knows what he's doing and will weigh them, and he'll find something. He may find ways to be, as the Blackhawks were in the big trade, the Rantanen trade, brokers to pick up assets without really giving up much of anything. So I have full confidence he'll be creative when he has to be. I do think he also understands the fan base. He played in front of this fan base. He's been watching for years now since he retired in all kinds of facets of the organization.
Mm.
He knows Flyers fans. Keith Jones certainly knows Flyers fans. Dan Hilferty certainly knows fans in this area. So they know there's some frustration out there. I think they probably anticipated it. If I recall correctly, Jordan, I believe Danny did say during the summer we could take a slight step back this year. He did say that. So,
Mhm.
this is not shocking probably. And when you throw in some of the woes they had in goaltending and other things, I mean, that's part of it. This whole rebuild might be accelerated a bunch more if they didn't lose their number one goaltender last year, right?
Yeah.
So you have these things that come along that you might not expect that you have to figure out a way to deal with, and we'll see how they do with it. But yeah, we'll get an idea of where they're at certainly at the trade deadline more so than we will, I think, in the next couple of days. That's for sure.
And they did give up a 4th round pick, Jim. I just checked that for
Yeah.
Eric
Yeah,
Johnson
so I
and
mean, 4th round pick is the percentage of a 4th round pick making it are very low. So
yeah,
why would anyone have a problem with that trade? They got a veteran who's loved throughout the league, is a great guy, attitude guy who can play and won't complain when he's not playing for a 4th round pick to help because the team not only lost John Walker, but Nick Seeler was hurt at the time and another defenseman was hurt at the time. They had 3 defensemen out. And I mean,
yeah.
you had to get somebody in here. So he's trying to at least give the team a chance to make the playoffs while trading Walker because he got a first round pick, which helps the rebuild. So I see more perhaps of that happening this year.
And I think for Denny Briere, you have to balance people. The fact is he's come out publicly and said he wants the team to be competitive and try to win every night. You can't just strip the team down when it's playing okay hockey and then just expect them to still have the mindset of winning and be competitive. So I think you have to consider the players' minds and how they're going to react to certain people maybe being moved or not moved. It's all the fine balance, I think, of what a GM has to go through. But I don't think Danny Briere has given off any reason to not believe he's the guy for the job right now. That I just think it's so early still in the process of what they're going through, and
Yeah,
I
I
get
will
it.
say this, Jordan. I think they might be closer to a point where they're willing to make a hockey trade where they
Yeah,
trade some of their younger players to get younger players back, maybe different
mhm,
position, what have you. Maybe they think a player has pretty much showing them all he's going to show them here, and a change of scenery
yeah,
might help them. And there's a similar player in another market that might be helped by a change of scenery coming here. Maybe that player's a center because we all know that's not their strongest position now or with the prospects outside of Luchenko. So, I mean, that could happen. I think we might be a little closer to that. Those are not easily made, though, and they're probably more made in the off season than they
yeah,
are at the trade deadline. So
mm,
we'll see about that. But make no mistake, I hope Flyers fans understand this is not Danny Briere and Keith Jones sitting back and saying, "Oh, the people are still showing up. Let's just let it go." No, they're watching, hoping to make moves. Their eye is still on the prize of that consistent greatness down the road, and you just can't grab that all at once. It just doesn't happen that way. And
yeah,
sometimes growing pains, well, they call them pains for a reason.
yeah,
It doesn't sit well with everybody, but you have to get through that. Think of it this way: they're still very much in the race. These games still mean something at this point. I mean,
yeah,
these are important games. These games leading up to the Four Nations, because if you really go into a dive for those 6 left or 5 left, whatever it is, um, I guess it's 6, right? 6 left, um, as we record this. I'm not sure when this gets out there, but I mean, if you really dive and slump into the Four Nations, that can change a lot of things because the
mm,
way the race is, the Flyers do need to push a little bit more to be in a good spot by the break than they were last year, where they were in a spot. So they're keeping an eye on that as well, and that's why these games mean something. Not only watching the players and hopefully as they're developing. And I forgot to mention that Joel Farabee, Bobby Brink is two other guys who are those young players that are looking to take next steps. And it's been like this, right?
Yeah.
And Bobby Brink's on their best line right now. Joel Farabee was scratched as a healthy scratch after playing 216 straight games, but he came back from that. He's playing great hockey. So we know it's in them to be the kind of players the Flyers need them to be part of the rebuild. But we continue to watch and see if they can do it consistently. So we watch for that reason. But yeah, we want to see if they can win games too. Because if they do, then they're in a playoff race, and those games down the stretch mean something. And that's a learning experience for these young players. And hopefully you make the playoffs, and that's even better learning experience for them. So all that is part of this that Danny has to factor in.
Yeah, a lot to factor in, and we'll see how interesting the Flyers can make it throughout the rest of the stretch. If they can stay in a playoff position or, excuse me, the playoff race like they did last year through game 82, I think it definitely made things interesting. It gave the Flyers good decisions, good things to evaluate. We'll see where it goes. Jim, a couple national broadcasts coming up. So we hope you maybe get a small break, but we're looking forward to your call on Sunday from Colorado. Thank you so much for the time, Jim. It's always great to get your insight. Just really appreciate you coming on.
Always great talking Flyers hockey. Have
Yeah.
faith, Flyers fans.
Jim, thanks so much again. Great to see you. Great to chat with you. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru, and
Thank you,
Flyers fans,
Ben.
as always. Thank you so much for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate and listen, and we can't wait to talk to you next time.